Committee to order for Monday, May 13th. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Does there have a motion?
Move to approve.
I have a move to approve from Councilman Padilla, seconded by Councilman Lesser. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's proceed now with the agency appeal process. I'll give you the floor if that's okay.
Okay,
All right.
so we have received 5 appeals. I believe everybody's here today, and we can just go and have the agency, normally this is what we do anyway, have the agency come to the podium and do their appeal. We have their letters, and I brought copies if you need them. And then staff will respond to what the reviewers have decided upon and the 2 questions that Rochelle grades. So.
Fantastic, fantastic. I will go ahead and just let you call them in whichever order you
How
see
about
fit.
LULAC. LULAC here.
Which one? This one? Good morning, I'm Kathy Vota with LULAC Senior Center. I've never gone through this process before, so basically I'm very confused on the scoring process for the 2020 grant application. We received lower scores and outcomes for prior grants, past grant administration on the 2019 application, and therefore decreased the points on the 2020 grant application. Our services have continued to increase. The need for our services for the seniors in the Topeka area continue to increase. And my concern is that it appears that the scoring on the administration of the grant is more heavily weighed upon in the scoring process than the needs and the services that we are providing in this community. This is a considerable loss of funding to our agency, and should we not receive the grant for 2020, we will have to look at deciding which services we will have to cut for our senior population.
Corey, it would be helpful. I have reviewed all the letters, as I'm sure Padilla has, and I don't know if you have it. It would be helpful as they come up. I could have a copy of the letters so I
I
could
was
follow.
trying to pull it up on the internet here.
I made some copies.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give you a chance to find LULAC's
Yeah.
letter. Is it in there? Should be the 3rd page.
Got it.
Got it? Okay, so we have 2 areas that LULAC lost points on. One was grant administration, and they received a 5 out of 10. So we are using the reporting period from 2018 because that's the completed year that the year is complete. We're obviously still in 2019. So the first quarter demographic report was incorrect, second quarter financial incorrect, and third quarter financial was incorrect, which is why she lost points there. And then outcomes on prior grants. Again, we're using the outcomes from the 2018. And of the outputs and the outcomes, you missed one of the outcomes just barely. So you got 83% met, so you lost some points on that as well. And you received a 15 on that, 15 out of 20.
If I may, Chair. Corey, I got the letter here, and that's what I'm trying to pull up. I read through the letter and the appeal application itself, the details part of that. Is that in here as well?
Are you looking for this?
No, not the scorecard, just the correspondence that they would have sent to you,
The email itself, or?
or just a copy of it? I'm trying to look. I know it's lengthy, it's several pages, because I read through each of them. You know, the cover sheet, or is what I see as the letter, is the cover sheet, but then accompanying it would have been their appeal.
Well, this is their official appeal.
That's it?
Letter.
Okay. And their,
Am I
and their,
correct, Kathy?
and the details
It
of
is.
their appeal?
But I have a question on that as well.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So one of the things she mentioned was the past grant administration in prior years. And in 2019, you did receive full points because your 2017 reporting was all on time and accurate. So you did receive full points that particular year.
Okay. I'm finding it. Just give me a minute. Here they are. Okay, along with this cover letter, if I may.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Councilman Lesser may have read as well. There's a copy of the application, I believe, in there. And it talks about describing the training and then how does your organization collect, describe the agency's accounting system. And in that report, it gives a little more detail in numbers and explanation in those areas where they have been scored less. And it provides, for me anyway, a little more detail that other than just one was late or I would like a little kind of a conversation, if you will, with me about once you got your denial or your scores, put it that way, I don't want to say denial, got your scores. Did you look over at your application and question where maybe there was a deficiency in your application or where you could make an explanation for those areas where you were found scored low?
I looked over the application. I could not make an explanation on how we got marked down on prior grant year when we received an increase in funding in the prior grant year. I was totally confused on that. I'm still very confused on how the scoring process went. I think it's fair to say that the software system for submitting reports is very difficult. I have assisted in doing that in the past. And without going into a lot of detail on that, I believe that there are some little quirks in that software when you're trying to submit reports. I think being marked down for not getting your report in on time when there is glitches in your system should not be a reason to reflect on the agency's services and what they are doing.
Okay, if I'm understanding, when I read through, I was looking at an issue with it when you talk about the system, where if you submitted it on a date, and then for some reason you may have had to resubmit additional information at the request of the city, that when you resubmitted it, it changed your submission date, so that if you sent it in on the 13th, you requested for more additional information on the 15th, and
That
when
is
you
correct.
resubmitted it, it restamped it to the 15th, which could make it past the application deadline date?
That is correct. And I, during this past grant year, had assisted in finding some of the difficulties in the system. So therefore, my reports were usually the first reports received because I would contact the city and say, this isn't working, this isn't working, and this isn't working.
Okay. So you were troubleshooting the system, working with the city
Yeah,
to point out those deficiencies, if there were some?
I was. I also went so far as helping another agency submit because she couldn't get it submitted either. So,
Okay. Corey?
Question for Corey.
Yeah.
Corey, real quick. Everyone used the same software system, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
We're always available for assistance to train at any time, Kathy. One thing I will mention that when we are saying that the reports are incorrect or late, we are accounting for the times where the system is down. And so we're obviously not going to count somebody late if it was a system situation. These were late beyond that. One thing that happens in EC Impact is if you submit and then you have to correct something, then you're resubmitting. And so that's the date that you submitted. Another area that happens is if Rochelle has to go in there to correct something, then you'll see even another entry of Rochelle's name where she has went in there to correct something in EC Impact. So the dates are accurate in EC Impact.
Okay.
And the information that's submitted in each quarter is the same,
Right.
so that doesn't change.
Well, in reading through all of the documents for not just LULAC, but Pappin's, Sole Reason, and East Topeka, for me, it seemed like I saw a recurring issue with an understanding of the process. And I know, Corey, I've talked with you and visited with you, and your office seems very receptive to questions and answers to trying to help get through the process. But there's also what I believe is an effort to standardize as much as possible so it keeps things on an even plane. And that's why you have the 0, 5, 15, 20, things like that, so that there's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we talked about that. But for me, administration seems to be given more weight than the actual outcomes of the efforts by each of these programs. Is that a fair assessment, or?
Outcomes on prior grants is 20 points. Administration is 10. So it's the scoring from the application is from the RFP and was already decided on prior to a prior committee. It's something that we can certainly look at if you guys want to have that discussion, but I think for purposes of 2020, those have already been established. But
And maybe I misstated it when I said it was given more weight. It seems like, even though it's 20 and 10, it seems like you can fall short of that 20 and still be good. But because that 10 seems to have more significance if you go from a 10 to a 5 to a 0 real quickly on maybe 1 or 2 issues, and that would typically disqualify for funding. And so that is something at least I would like to discuss maybe at some other time. I don't know if we can apply it in this round of funding or review.
And for sake of this meeting, Councilman Padilla, we're co-chairs, so you don't have to ask me anything.
Okay.
I just got it rolling because you were visiting.
Okay.
Along those lines, in my opinion, I share some of the same concerns as you share in regards to that. Unfortunately, in regards to this term, I don't know that it's necessarily applicable or worth a discussion in regards to I don't think that it is, would be appropriate to make changes on the weighting factor after the fact of, I think that would something we'd have to do moving forward, quite frankly, whether I agree with you
Yeah,
or not.
yeah.
Because that probably should have been something that, if we had felt that way, had done prior to this process, and we can look at the weighting for moving forward.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
that is kind of one of the, quite frankly, one of the difficulties of our committee system is people coming in and off, and people learning versus understanding how the process truly works. You and I are kind of learning on the fly here a little bit. So for my opinion, I think we need to just hold to what the requirements were, the way it was this year, and certainly if we feel strongly, I think that is a discussion that we have prior to the committee ceasing for this year, and possibly having a discussion after this process is done of exactly the weighting factors and how we feel that needs to be.
I
That's
agree.
my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. One thing I would ask, though, is where are we in making the decision? I mean, as a committee, are we on a timeline that we must meet, or can we still have some time to visit with staff to see if reconsideration for any of these applications can be taken into this year's funding efforts, or do we have to make a decision this week, next week,
Well,
whatever?
I think, in my opinion, I was not prepared to vote today on these appeals. My opinion was, I wanted to hear the information, go back, do my due diligence. Then again, I think it's even more appropriate with Chairman Cohen not being here. I mean,
Agreed.
it's either you and I agree or we don't agree, and then it fails if we're in a stack, So that's my position.
So to answer your question, the biggest deadline that you guys have to worry about would be our 2020 budget development process. So we try to have the committee's recommendation for that 2020 funding, which the finalization of these scores and the funding recommendation to City Council, that's your recommendation for next year's budget. That typically we try to have that by the second, no later than the second meeting in June. Because of that 2020 budget development process, you guys will need that number to be able to plug into the bigger budget. So that's really your kind of drop dead date in order to stay on that budget schedule. And then just to follow up on what you guys were just talking about, the next step in the process for this committee will be to evaluate the scoring criteria and the priorities. So once you finalize this current application process, that'll be the next thing that you guys do.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I'd like to add one more thing. The evaluation process was very unclear to me on how to proceed. I received an email that I needed to put it in writing with the application packet, and I had not a clue what the application packet was. I did try to contact the city offices, actually all three of you, a few times, and I never got a response. So I didn't know what I was supposed to send. So I would like to ask that in the future, that maybe it's detailed out a little bit, that, if you are denied funding, that these are the steps that you need to go through for an appeal process.
Did you try to contact them by phone or email?
I did.
By phone?
Email Rochelle email, and Sasha and Corey by phone.
Okay.
I never received a phone call, so
And
I
I
apologize.
some gentleman answered the phone and said that you both were unavailable each time I tried to call. So I
so you
was like,
didn't leave a message. Okay, that
No.
makes more
Could you
sense, because
forward
I
that
have
email to
no
me that
knowledge
you
of you
sent,
calling.
please? Or forward that email to Liz, please,
Yeah.
that you sent?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Here's
Councilman Padilla,
here's
anything
the
else?
email from Rochelle replying about the application packet. if you
Oh,
want
so
to
we
see.
did reply to it.
We
then.
did
So you
reply.
did receive a response.
I believe I received a response the Monday prior to the grant deadline on Wednesday.
So you just said that you didn't receive a response. Did you receive a response?
I received a response 2 days before I needed to turn in my appeal letter, but I had not a clue what the
That wasn't
application.
my question for you. My question was, you sat there and said that you did not receive a response. You did receive a response.
A phone response.
I'm going to ask you one more time. You said you did not receive an email response. Did you receive an email response?
Yes, sir, I did.
Thank you.
Okay, having heard Councilman Lesser's comments, I agree that I too was not prepared to make a vote today, but saw this as an opportunity for those applicants to present whatever issues that they may have encountered in the process, or would it be preferable to have a submission in writing to this committee rather than go into a long discussion about why were we given this score when we believe this score is due? That could get into a whole lot of back and forth.
No, I think we've received the written response. I think now's the time for them to voice their question, which I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. And I'll be quite frank with you. I wanted that email because you had initially said she did not respond to you, and I would have held her accountable for not responding to it, but she did respond to you. So I think those are things that we have to clear out versus someone's, I want to ask the questions of both sides of it. And if we aren't responding to something, then we're going to be held accountable. But I don't want those statements being made when they're not accurate either.
Okay. So, Ms. Vota, is there anything else you can offer us to consider and hear today that would give us more information that we've seen in the written application or the appeal to consider as we move forward? Because as we said, we probably won't vote today, but in our discussions, we'll have to have something more than, I think, anything that you would want us to take to that meeting along with Corey and Rochelle. So,
I don't think there's anything further other than what I've already said.
okay. Councilman Lesser?
Thank you. Corey, if we can move on to the next one.
Sure. Councilmember Clear?
Different being on this side of the podium.
Yeah, good morning, Councilwoman.
And I
Morning,
can't knock the
Councilwoman.
process.
First thing I want to say is thank
Deputy
you
Mayor.
for or Deputy Mayor, I want to say thank you for changing the name of this committee. It
Yeah.
makes much more sense, the name of it.
Great. Well, I can't knock your system very much because I helped devise it, but being on this side, I see some issues. I didn't attend the training, so that's on me, and I probably should have. I've written grants before, and I've also been a grant reviewer. So when I sat on that side of the podium, it was clear. When I saw the scoring for the grant I sent in, it wasn't not quite so clear. One thing is kind of what Councilmember Padilla said, the weighing, I think, is off. If there is an agency that does excellent all the way through and bam, misses one and they're out, I don't think that's right. When I was a grant reviewer, we had the same kind of scoring, but then at the end, we looked at the overall program. It wasn't just set only by numbers. It was also how valuable was the program. Did it look like they had their act together? It wasn't just because they missed one question. And I think that's a concern. And I also I know we have the 5, 10, and I don't remember, someone came up here one year and was explaining this. I don't know, Tawny, if it was you, but they said when you go from a 10 to a 5, maybe you were a 9, but those few points can knock you out of the grant funding. And so when you had, like I put down 5 partnerships and ended up with a 3, right? When you could have gotten 2 and ended up with a 3. So I think it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you have 6 partners, you get 6. If you get 5, you get 5. If you get 4, it's 4. Instead of what is it, 5, 3, and 0? Is that what it is? Yeah. So I had 5. Someone else may have 2, but we get the same score. And I don't think that's quite right. The outputs and outcomes, I don't know what happened, because I'll tell you what, staff was so helpful to me. And I had the correct outputs and outcomes, and I had them in there. And then when I looked at it after I submitted it, crap, that wasn't right. But I just switched them around. And to me, when I sat there, it's like, I'm sorry, you should do it right. If it's standing up here, it's like, I know what I'm talking about. I just switched them around. And that goes back to looking at the overall program. Wow, they made sense. Yeah, they switched there, but they were there. They were just switched. And I know it's going to be difficult because you can't play favorites. So you're going to have to hold yourself to a procedure. But I think we're losing the individuality of the nonprofits by doing that. I think we're not looking deep enough into what they do and how if we're going to fund social services and we want to fund social services, then I don't think we can be that difficult, that hard. Now, I know I'm not getting enough points to get this grant, but I wanted to come up here and talk about what I see from filling out the grant and going through the process. What else? Okay, so Corey, read that question again where it says client input formal process.
Okay, so for client input formal process, you lost all points. The question was, how does your organization collect and make use of client feedback regarding programs and services?
And I said, we don't.
That's right. And
Because
that's
we don't
why
have
you lost
we didn't have a
points.
grant. So we don't have that process. Now, if they would have said, what are you going to do with this grant? How are you going to do that process? I would have answered that. Because later in the packet, it says, how many shoes did you fulfill last year? And I put 0 because we didn't have it last year. So in my thinking, this was 0 because we didn't have it last year. But that's not right. I guess I should have made up what we're going to do if we get the funding. And you're right, it did say it it did lay it out black and white. This is 0, this is 3, whatever. It's just, I don't know. I think sometimes we're getting to be a machine and not being a little human on that side because it's so political, because you have to be so fair. That's all I have to say.
And Deputy Mayor Clear, I appreciate your comments, and I agree with many of what you're saying. That does make sense, especially if prior outcome, if you're brand new, you shouldn't be counted against for starting up.
She wasn't.
She was not?
No, if
no
you don't
points are
have
lost.
a past grant history with us,
Who does?
any of the agencies that
Oh, yeah, I
applied-
don't.
Right.
She was not scored on that.
So
Okay, that was the
it's
different
curved
category she
in
was
her
talking
That's
favor.
a different one.
Gotcha. Moving, let me first say, anything else? Anything else? Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I have. The only thing as we move forward, I want to make it clear we are going to have, as Councilman Padilla and I discussed, we're going to have a session where I invite everyone, whether they did receive funding or they're in the appeal process here, to come forward and share what their concerns were with the waiting, all those different things. At this point in time, and as in an effort to keep on focus for what we're doing here, I do ask that individuals coming forward now to speak specifically with what their concerns are with the reasons they were not received versus the actual process, because that's not what we're here to do today. We will do that in the future as we look to evaluate if we can do this thing better or we can make any changes. But I can tell you, just from the conversation that Mr. Padilla and I had earlier, we're not going to change the weighting factors. We're not going to make changes to the current process. Is that correct, what I'm hearing from you, Councilman Padilla?
Well, yes and no.
That's fine.
Okay. I think you're right that maybe changing the process in midstream would be a mistake. However, I do feel that there's room for reconsideration using the process that's in place and looking at whether or not it was applied in a way that, is equitable across the board beyond just the numbers. Deputy Mayor Clear makes a point, and I've seen this happen personally because of my affiliation with some units and groups and stuff, and that is that I think it can be well argued that just everybody who applies has a good cause and reason that they're doing what they do in the city of Topeka. Sometimes I struggle with the idea that this person over here will get what they asked for, all of what they asked for, and this organization over here won't get anything. And for me, I can't see why that shared funding can't be spread equitably across the board, rather than give yes and no, giving something to all those as we can afford it. And so that's my concern, is some hard and fast rules I know are necessary for processing. It helps staff. They have to manage all this. That's a lot of work. So we want to keep that work level down. Now, I sympathize with the staff trying to sort through all of this, but at the same time, I don't want the reactions that may be projected to those applicants to be that it's just black and white with no consideration at all for the work that they've done. And I commend you as well for reading through that. That's a lot of stuff to read through.
No, and I completely agree with you, and I think that's what the appeals process is for. We're going to go back and decide if we need to change some of those things. I just think I wanted to make clear that we're not going to go back and re-weight things and rescore all the application based on making those type of any changes fundamentally to the process is all I was more referring to.
Well, again, I agree, but at the same time, I'm in a position right now that I feel that using the process that we have in place, it didn't produce the results that I had hoped for this category of funding. So again, we can continue with our discussions on that.
Okay. Let's see, Deborah Dawkins.
Having given all that has already been said, I don't want to.
Pardon me, ma'am. Can you, for the record, can you say your name and your organization?
Deborah Dawkins, East Topeka Senior Center.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Having heard what has been said prior to me, I don't want to waste time repeating the same concerns. Just here to appeal for the fact that, East Topeka Senior Center, our numbers, we provide transportation to medical appointments. We provide door-to-door transportation Monday through Friday for appointments 10 to 2:30, and we are the only senior center in town that services all of Shawnee County. The loss of this, the potential loss of this 2020 funding is a significant part of our budget, which is under $200,000, which would mean that we definitely, I know Kathy said she'd have to look at, we definitely would not be able to provide much needed transportation for seniors who are at risk. We're talking about the amount that's equivalent of 1.5 times one of our driver's salaries. Our drivers don't make a lot, so we're working on a shoestring budget as it is. Last year, we provided 10,785 rides, of which 5,477 were for medical transportation. And this year, and that was a 20% increase over 2017. And this year, already in the first 4 months, we are on track to exceed that number by at least 12%. So given I have the same issues as everyone else with the past grant administration and submitting something, and I asked my bookkeeper, you know, because I got my part in and the bookkeeper does the demographics and the financial, and it was a couple of days late, and, you know, just knowing why that happened, but just whatever reconsideration can be given the fact that this loss of funding will make such a major impact on the seniors of our organization.
If I may, just commenting on the statistics and the numbers that you gave, they're impressive. Are you a full-time senior center, or is that a part-time senior center?
We are, our transportation is we're open for seniors from 9 to 2.
Okay.
And we provide transportation for appointments between 10 a.m. and 2:30 p.m.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And we have plans to try to expand because we're still not meeting the demand.
Thank you.
All right, Tawny?
Good morning. I am Tawny
Good morning.
Stottlemyre, Executive Director of your Community Action Agency. And I want to tell you that at Community Action, we fight poverty in your community, in the city of Topeka, and that I will definitely be back to talk to you about process and pieces of the grant application and the administration piece that I believe I will reiterate things that I said last year that did not happen in changes to this process. But today I'm here to tell you that the loss of funding that is proposed to our Latino Family Development Program will be fatal to the program. This program provides an important part of our population, a vulnerable part of our population, with assets to help them succeed. We're teaching English language skills, we're translating medical and school documents, and we are helping people file their taxes as part of their civil responsibilities. When we talk about what went wrong with this particular application, I believe mistakes were made in scoring Community Action's Latino Family Development application. I don't believe they were on purpose, but I do believe that our data significantly disagrees with the information that we received from city staff when we inquired about the loss of points. Two of the areas where we lost points, you've heard already this morning, past grant administration and past performance. Past grant administration, as you know, would be whether our reports were late or whether they were accurate. Our data indicates that for the Latino Family Development Program last year, our reports were not late. Our data indicates that our reports were accurate, that city staff had questions. One of those questions we were told when we inquired, never mind, And another question had to do with a $251 difference between personnel line item and non-personnel line item. But in the end, the budget balanced. It wasn't an imbalance in the application or an imbalance in the report. It was $251, excuse me, that had to be spent over here instead of over here. That's the reality of grant making and grant operating under a grant funding. Any organization that tells you that they came out with a budget that exactly equaled what they intended to spend the year and a half before when they wrote the grant, that they spent exactly to the penny what they thought they would spend in personnel and exactly to the penny what they thought they would spend in non-personnel, is making magic work for your eyes. Even the federal government allows you to spend 2 cents more here or 2 cents more there, or 10% more here and 10% more there. But my point here is not that we should argue whether you should be able down to the penny. My point is that our reports were timely, our reports were accurate. However, we lost points in that category for not being accurate and not being timely. Our data fundamentally disagrees with the data that city staff used to score that element. In addition to that past grant performance, our data indicates that we were well above the 90% threshold required in the allocation, in the evaluation criteria. Every single element of outcomes and outputs that we supplied information back to the city demonstrated that we were above the criteria needed to get full points in that category. And yet we lost points in that category. I believe this was simply because mistakes were made. We should not allow mistakes to take away vital services for an important part of our population. And as I said earlier, if this funding does not come through the city, if the city decides not to invest in Latino family development, it will be fatal to the program. So that's the threshold that we stand upon today. Now, the third area where we lost points, by the way, we were 2 points below the threshold to be funded overall. But the third area where we lost points was in board composition, board leadership. Community Action has a 33-member board of directors. The application criteria requires that you should have 65% of those board members on average attending meetings for the last year. The difficulty with that, as I explained in our appeal letter, is you could actually have a board of directors of an applicant agency never make quorum at a meeting and still meet that 65% criteria and get full funding in the application evaluation process. What you're really looking for is a board of directors that's showing up and doing the work that it needs to do, conducting business, voting, taking action, and doing their due diligence. So we had 62%, 62.19 to be exact, not 65, but our board had quorum. That is not a reason to take this group of volunteers who dedicate their time to fighting poverty in the community and take funding away from the efforts that they put forth, because 65% is a criteria that is based on, I don't know, but I know it's not quorum, and I know it's not the ability to conduct business. So I'm very concerned as I appear before you today, because this is not our first time appearing before you to talk about how these particular areas of this process have taken away this city's investment in Community Action's anti-poverty services. Last year, we faced the exact same problems with our First Tee program, and it dealt a fatal blow to the program. I don't want to see this happen again, and it is within your capacity as the council to stop that from happening. So I'm not going to be shy about saying to you, I do hope you will reverse this decision. I do hope you will reconsider the scoring process. And I do hope And in fact, I insist that we take the needs of our Latino families into account when deciding where to invest your city dollars. You have a lot of information from me in writing, and I'm sure there may be questions, so I'll be happy to stand for those.
A quick question, Tawny, and thank you for coming today and for the work that you've done previously in everything.
Thank you.
The Latino Family Program, do other agencies that apply for this, to the city for funding, do they provide specifically the same kind of services anywhere else?
I wish I could answer your question but I don't know who applied to the city for funding.
Okay, that's
But I
fair.
can tell you that there are other opportunities similar to those in our city. There are never enough opportunities for the people who need them. So when we have variety, when we have different places that people can go where they feel comfortable, and particularly right now, Councilman, this is not an environment where Latino people feel safe in America. Having a place where they can go, where they know the people, where they feel safe, whether that's community action or another place, is really critical to getting those services to them. And I can exemplify that to you by saying that our research asking people who filled out taxes with us through our bilingual free tax program, they indicated that over 40% of those people would not have filed taxes if they hadn't had community action as a partner, a safe place they felt they could come to perform that civic duty.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's important to understand how the Latino population is so diversified. There are people like myself who are third generation,
Sure.
and there are a lot of people who are just arriving in Topeka. And if I can indulge everyone for me to make a comment, one of the things that we talked about as a city council, one of our priorities, is growing the population of the city of Topeka. And had it not been for some of those immigrants coming to the city of Topeka, our population would be at a minus. We would have lost population. So I think what you do to make them productive, contributing members of our community is important, because they have to put into the system so the system can serve them just like everyone else. So I appreciate that effort. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our board members who came today as well.
Do you want staff's response? Okay.
Yes.
So board representation, I think she's already discussed it, is 65, so she lost points there. Past grant administration, the third quarter was submitted incorrect with negative balances, as she said, and Rochelle had to go in to make the corrections, which is the entry on EC Impact that you'll see where Rochelle went in. So that was lost points there. On outputs on prior grants, there were 4 outputs, 4 outcomes, and 2 of the outputs and 1 of the outcomes was not met, which gave a 62.5%, which is why she lost points on that. Sure. I have a copy right here if you want it. Okay. Debbie?
Which one is she?
4?
And 4. Thank you.
Oh, okay, so it's 4.
Oh, Pam Fisk.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Lake with Pappins Landing Senior Center. We are here, we understand that the outcomes, our score dropped this year on the outcomes for a prior grant. I went and looked at the 2018 report because that's the one in question. Our outcome percentage achieved was not on there. Again, that's something that was not put on there. We provided what we said we were going to provide. It's I think, I don't know. I'm saying I think what happened is I clicked on that achieve and nothing happened, so I just assumed that calculated, and then I never really paid any attention. Rochelle did email everybody, all agencies, that says, take a look at your outcomes. I took a look at mine and thought, mine looked good. If I had known that they were missing, I would have corrected that. But we are handed out the final 2018 report. I didn't print all of them, but the final with those numbers added. And we did provide what we said we would do. Matter of fact, we provided way over what we said we would do. I could go over all those with you if you want to take the time to go over all those or look at them. But all in all, for the outcomes, every one of them was met. Except for transportation, we said we would serve 70 people in transportation, and we served 67. That was the only difference. That's 96%. For the entire year, somewhere in my notes it has the total for the entire year, what we met, and I'm overlooking it. Do you see that, Dennis?
67 out of 70%, 70 on the transportation.
Right. Right. So the 2020. But the handouts we gave you was a correction to both the final report to 2018 and then that percentage achieved for 2020 because it was forgotten on there also. We really do hope that you look at this again. This is just a mistake. And look at the fact that we are serving those people that need to be served. We are doing what we say we will do, provide. It's just an overlook, a mistake on my part. I admit it's a mistake on my part. But I hate to see that seniors suffer because of a small mistake I made on a report.
Just Dennis Tenpenny, I'm the board president. Just a couple of other notes on that is, our questions are, we're under the understanding that we only missed one of the outcomes and outputs, yet our score was 50%, 10 out of the 20. So that's the number one question. Number two, organizational leadership, we scored a 3 out of a 5. It was noted that we did not meet the 15% minority representative on our board. Our score, we actually have 14.31%. So less than 1% of missing that mark, but yet we scored 2 points less. We were not approved because we were 2 points off. We scored 88% on our scoring. Of course, 90% is approval. One of the questions that's been noted here is, unfortunately, the award amounts are all or nothing. And so in this case, it's nothing that's being awarded to Pappins. And unbeknownst to us, when we got here, all 3 senior centers are here today. And wow, that would be so devastating to the city to lose all these senior services. It represents 12% of our budget. Each one collectively a different percentage. But the message that would be sent to the city would be seniors are no longer be receiving any services from the city. Do you really want to send that message? I hope not.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Are you done, Debbie?
Corey, go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, so she handed out the corrected version. Of course, the reviewers didn't have the corrected version, so they had to go off of what was actually submitted, which were zeros. So they got 10 points out of 20 and technically shouldn't have even got 10 points. So Dennis, you're right. There was an error on that part. It should have been lower. The other, what was there other? Oh, yes.
The numbers served were there, the achieved percentage wasn't there.
Yeah, so that particular question is outcomes and outputs on prior grants. So we would count your outcomes, which you had 0 because you didn't enter them. Do you see what, I have a copy if you want to see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because you plugged them in here, which is great, but what we had to go off at the time of the review was zeros. And so that's why we lost points.
what was presented today, of course, the difficulty in maneuvering system.
Sure, we're always available for questions too. That is our final appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to say for the record that I am the messenger and I love you all.
Well, for the record, if we're going that road too, I appreciate you taking the time to visit with me and talk with me. I think I made it pretty clear that I try to support city staff as much as I can in the work that they do. But in that support, I know from being a city employee that it isn't always perfect and probably will never be. And so that the opportunity to review what we do, how we do it, and for whom we do it, I think is important to everything that we provide as a city to our citizens. So thank you for all your work and everything. And it's not meant to be a criticism as it is a review of. As I understand, Councilman Lesser stated, being new to this committee, that some of the things that are in place now may have been put in place by previous members of the committee. And that is an issue that when the next group comes on, do we change it again? And I don't know that, I think we all have seen that cartoon where the question is asked, who wants change? And everybody raises their hand. But then the question that follows up as who wants to change, and everybody puts their hand down, because change can be difficult. But if it's done in the right spirit to make us more responsive than accountable, I think that's something that I look at. So thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you, Councilman. I would echo your comments as well as, in a perfect world, I wish we could fund absolutely everybody who's here. And in regards to the city staff, this is a difficult task. I know that you guys are tasked with as well. And you're only as good as the criteria that we set forth or is set forth for you to evaluate these. And that's, I've heard some very some very constructive information from many of you that came out here that I completely agree with, that we need to take a look at in regards to the process and how that's done. The one positive thing, though, that is, I did not hear anything in regards to critical of the staff for the way that they evaluated it, because there are, like I said, many things that I do agree with you in saying, the weighting factor in here, we need to look at that. So there again, we're tasked with what we have, and I think you guys did a good job in evaluating it based on that. And that's what the appeal process is now for us to look at, not necessarily, like I said, in my opinion, to go back and change the way it's done, but the appeal process is, if we didn't have one, then if there wasn't an appeal process, obviously there would be no reason for an appeal. So that's why we're here, is to look at those and see if we need to make any interpretations on our part. That being said, if there's not anything else, Councilman Padilla, the next item on the agenda is any other items in front of the committee. I have none.
I have none.
I would like to go ahead and set the next meeting date for the next meeting, understanding that from Sasha, we do need to have that obviously prior to the
Budget.
council meeting in June, the second council meeting in June. Chairman Cohen gets to adjust his calendar based on what we decide here. How much time, I would personally, today is the 13th. I would ask possibly for the week of the 27th, if that's possible. That gives us next week to dive into what we need to do, and then maybe Monday the 27th.
That's
Memorial
Memorial Day.
Day.
That's not going to work on Memorial Day.
The Thursday of that week is wide open for me, the 30th.
I cannot do the 30th. I could do Mondays. I could do Tuesday. I could do Wednesday. I could do Tuesday or Wednesday that week.
If it being the AM, we have,
GTP luncheon on Tuesday. Is that what you're looking at?
yeah,
I could do 8:30, 9, anything on early, if that works.
I need to probably get the agenda schedule, and here's what I'm thinking, just so that you guys know. I believe that we're required to post any attachments and whatnot 2 weeks prior to
really?
the meeting date, and that's why I got the confused look on my face. Let me go get,
I just,
yeah, I don't always
No,
wear that.
that's okay.
Do
We
you
don't
know
have,
do you know the date that we had them scheduled on the agenda? I can grab it. I don't have it with me. I think that's right. Oh. Okay, hang on. Oh,
hey, why don't we do this?
I'll be right back.
Okay, 10-4. Are we both good then, though, if that does work, Michael?
yeah, how about
The AM of the 28th?
28th?
If we meet their criteria, does that work good?
I have 11 o'clock, but, so if we do it early,
Do 8?
Yeah, it's fine.
You in charge of my copy, Liz? Oh, they have something Tuesday. Wednesday's fine with me. I don't know about you, Michael.
Wednesday right now, that's good. Liz, if you could send out a meeting request.
Yeah. I think Sasha's checking to see if that is on the.
Wednesday the
the
28th, you're talking about.
yeah.
I mean,
June 18th is the date, council date that we currently have it scheduled for. So my deadline to get that stuff into that Nova system would be June 5th.
So we're good then if we go the 29th then? 28th, 29th. Okay, you want to do that, Liz? Perfect.
8 o'clock.
She's sending out an invite, did you not hear?
Okay, yeah, well, I want to make sure I get a lot of those, so do you.
No, I just had to take the opportunity to harass you.
Every time, yeah.
Anything else?
I just.
Sure, go ahead.
If I may, I'm concerned that we might have to have another meeting if there are changes made to the appeal hearings, because if we change the way we're, say, past grant administration, where we're not going to be maybe as harsh, I don't know if that's the appropriate word.
Precise.
Then, precise maybe, then we would probably need to do that for the other agencies to make it fair, and then we have a whole new funding for the agencies. So
What about a week back, Mike? Would the 22nd work for you? It's a Wednesday as well.
So a week from this Wednesday.
Would that give you enough time?
The 27th,
22nd.
22nd?
You guys are the ones that have to determine, because you
That's
guys
fine.
have the next
That works
say.
for
and-
That way, if you have
Yeah.
a follow-up, we could use the follow-up following week to do
I
that.
say that's a smart way to go. Yeah, if
That's
we have-
fine. That's fine with me.
I would block,
Didn't you hear you're going to send out an invitation?
yes. I think that's
22nd
wise.
and
28th just will be a tentative.
a
28th will be
tentative,
tentative, yeah.
if necessary. The 22nd, what time is convenient for you to start? 9 o'clock again, rather than the 8 o'clock?
8, 9, yeah, whatever. When's
Yeah, the
Tuesday,
first
Wednesday?
meeting, Wednesday, the 22nd, at 9 o'clock. And then if necessary, we'd meet a week later, the following Wednesday, on the 29th. And again, let's do a 9 o'clock, because I have a second meeting that day too. And that way it gives you time to get in the office, get prepared, rather than just come in, bang, shoot.
Yeah, okay.
Is that okay?
Anything else?
Make sure Jeff knows.
What?
Make sure Jeff knows as the chair.
It's not my day to babysit.
Yeah.
Which I
That's
know
good.
that we already talked about this, but if I could beat this dead horse
Yeah,
one more time.
Sure.
I would strongly urge you guys to not change the scoring mechanism in this current process. If you want to make changes to it, change it in next year's process, which we will do this year. The scoring criteria was released with the RFP for applications, and changing that after the fact just seems...
No, we talked, I mean, as you said,
I think-
we talked a little bit about that, and there again, we have an appeal process in case we need to make any changes in what the awards were.
Two individual scores, yes, sir.
And I get, there again, this is just me speaking, but fundamentally, I will not go back. Everyone had the opportunity when it came out to review it, if they had questions about it, et cetera, et cetera. The deadline was the same, the software was the same. Everyone had the same opportunity. Not that I don't see some change, not that I don't have some concerns with the weighting factors. That's not you guys, but some concerns with some of the weighting factors and things like that. But I don't believe in doing that retroactively. We do that moving forward if that's something that we need to do. There again, as I said, we have an appeal process to see if we want to look at them individually or change any of those things, and that's what it's for. In my opinion, not fundamentally go back and recreating the wheel after the fact. And I think that becomes, I think that to a certain extent becomes punitive to the other organizations that did their job, and so I'm not interested in that. So.
Yeah, and I think, I agree. I think we made that clear, not change the system, but maybe reconsidering the scores given using this current system.
Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.